Hello everyone, and welcome to our discussion of credit cards in Design Manager. My name is Brad, and I'll be hosting the demonstration today. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to enter them into the questions pane on your GoToWebinar panel. If the question is outside of the scope of today's discussion, please email them to support@designmanager.com. Lastly, if you miss a portion of the webinar or want to review any of our past discussions, go to our Help Center at knowledge.designmanager.com. Click on the Webinars menu, go down to Recorded Webinars, and you can see links to all of our past discussions that you can review at your leisure. Today, we'll be discussing how to properly configure and implement credit cards in Design Manager, and also review some common errors or pitfalls. Since reconciling your credit card is an extremely important task after the credit card has been configured, we have an entire webinar dedicated just to that process, which can be viewed again from our Help Center. In today's economy, use of a credit card in running your business is essentially unavoidable, but provided you make timely payments, it can also be a strong asset in managing your expenses, aiding in bookkeeping with the convenient record of purchases, helps in building your company's credit score, etc. As usual, we'll be using examples in both Design Manager and Design Manager Professional, as configuring Design Manager for credit cards is nearly identical in both platforms. That being said, I'll be focusing primarily on Design Manager to demonstrate the configuration, while switching to Professional predominantly to show where certain functions can be found. Now, I have already created an American Express credit card account, but we're going to walk through the process of creating a new Visa credit card account. Our accounts are, of course, found under Glossaries, Accounts in Design Manager, and here is my American Express credit card account. In Professional, you find your chart of accounts under the Accounting tab and under the General Ledger pane for accounts. And again, you can see the windows are very similar. The very first step in creating our credit card account is to create the vendor for the credit card provider, such as Capital One, Citibank, Bank of America, American Express, etc. For example, let's say that Bank of America will be providing our Visa credit card. So we're going to go to our Glossaries and Vendors, which again in Professional you would access under your project, Vendors under List and Glossaries, and we're going to add a new one. Let's come up with a creative code such as BNKAM for Bank of America, and we're going to fill in all of the appropriate information such as the name, Bank of America, the address. We'll just throw in Design Manager's corporate offices for an example. Spring Creamery Road, Town, PA 18902. And again, you could put in phone number, those types of things. That's entirely optional. The account number, you could put the credit card number in there for your reference. Further, we can use the print account number on check option. This is going to show our credit card number right on our physical check that we generate to allow the credit card processor to ensure payment goes to the right account. Category. I could use a category for the credit card such as operating, indicating that this vendor is for operations only. And I could even further classify the category of operating with the type for credit card. Finally, we're going to click OK and save our Bank of America vendor. This is going to be the entity that we're actually paying when we go to remit payment of our Visa charges. So we can see it's an operating vendor with the credit card type to further categorize it. Next, let's actually create the credit card liability account for our Visa account. So we'll go back to our Glossaries, Accounts. The credit card account is a liability, as the credit card provider is essentially loaning you the funds to make your purchases, and you're liable for the repayment. So if we add for our new account, we're going to select a liability number, which are generally in the 20,000s, and we'll select one not being used, such as 20200. And our name, let's make it quite obvious, Bank of America Visa. The account type we just discussed is going to be a liability, but it's going to be the special liability for credit cards. When we select that liability, we have some additional information. First, the credit card payee. This is the entity that we're going to be associating payment for this account for, which in our case is our brand new Bank of America vendor. The credit card number, again, is optional. That's only for your internal reference. We'll leave that blank in our example. And if we click OK, we have our credit card account created as well. But what happened behind the scenes, if we look at our vendors, Design Manager automatically updated our Bank of America vendor and associated the default expense account to our Bank of America Visa. This is going to become very important and very handy when we actually go to remit payment to Bank of America. And quite honestly, for a new credit card, that's it. But if we're starting, if we're ready to start indicating credit card purchases in Design Manager with that brand new credit card. Now, if you're brand new to Design Manager or inputting a credit card with an outstanding balance, there's going to be one more very simple step. And you can do it in two ways. First, you need to actually get all the information or the balance of that credit card into Design Manager. Well, you could input all the purchases that make up the balance, which is the more accurate method, albeit much, much more time-consuming. Or you could make a quick journal entry to input the balance into the credit card account and an offsetting account or accounts to record the prior purchases. So I've already created an expense account to reflect all the prior credit card purchases. I'm not going to concern myself with the detail of all those purchases. I just want to get the current balance that I owe upon the card into Design Manager. And this is going to hold all of those prior expenses. Of course, you'd always want to check with your accounting professional about what he or she would like to use for that account as well. So I'm going to create what is known as a journal entry. And to do so, we go to Documents and Accounting, the Journal Entries and Miscellaneous view, and I'm going to create a journal entry. Design Manager automatically generates a journal entry number. I sometimes like to change that to something a little bit more indicative of the actual what the journal entry is actually representing. And this could be opening balance for CC. I'll put in my entry date, which is the current date of the balance. Let's say that's the beginning of July. Opening Visa balance. And then I'm going to use the Add button as indicated by the green plus sign. The first account we're going to affect is going to be, well, of course, our Bank of America Visa account. And let's say our balance is $2,500. Now, since the Bank of America Visa account is a liability account, by crediting that account, we'll actually be increasing it. Liability accounts get increased when credited and decreased when debited. Now, every financial transaction must have at least two accounts. So we're affecting our credit card account, and we're required to have another account being affected, at least another account, if not more. So we'll click Add again, and now we're going to use that expense account that I created to reflect the prior purchases. Expense accounts get increased when we debit them. And notice that I enter the debit amount, my net debits and credits for the entire journal entry goes to 0, indicating that I've made a balanced journal entry. click OK, and we can see that we're going to increase our Bank of America account by $2,500 and simultaneously increasing our product credit card purchases expense account by the same amount. And if we hit OK, we can now look at our account glossary, and for our Bank of America Visa, we look at our balances and see there's our opening balance of $2,500. Likewise, on our prior credit card purchase expense account, we can see the offsetting $2,500 there as well. So the journal entry is used perfectly for such an instance where we're trying to get a balance into an account very quickly. Now, entering credit card purchases. There are primarily two strategies for entering your credit card purchases. The first is to enter the bills as they are incurred. Say at the end of the day or the end of the week, grab the receipts and enter them all. The benefit here is that the labor needed to record the expenditures is spread throughout the month. Further, the purchase is recent, so there's minimal problems trying to determine what was purchased, how it should be classified, etc. The second school of thought is to enter all the purchases when the statement from the credit card provider is received. This method consolidates the bookkeeping to a single day or so, and it also ensures that your credit card will reconcile as you're simply entering exactly what the credit card provider has recorded. Now, if the credit card provider has made a mistake, however, it's much harder to catch unless you still have each receipt and are verifying that they match the statement. Either method or combination of the two is completely acceptable. Using the credit card. Recording credit card payments in Design Manager, as I said, is very easy. But we'll quickly run through a couple different options. So let's say that we have a deposit on one of our purchase orders for the Carter's Brigantine Beach Home. Go down to our purchase orders, and we can highlight our Century Furniture purchase order. Click the vendor deposit button. And on the vendor deposit window, most of the information is automatically filled out for us. The vendor, today's date for the deposit date, the amount that we are currently owing as a deposit. But on our Pay With option, there's always the ability to pay with a check, but we can also see both of our credit card accounts that we've configured. And if we select Bank of America, notice that our Pay Now option goes away since we're not going to be affecting our checking account. And we can put in a transaction description. Those of you who have heard my webinars in the past know that transaction descriptions are entirely optional, but I find them to be an invaluable tool when going to review information that I may have entered in months or even years prior. And it could be something as simple as deposit on sofa chairs, which is what this purchase order is for. And if we click OK, we can now see that we have our deposit listed for our purchase order, and the fact that it is indeed charged to our Visa account. We can do the same for vendor invoices. So if we go to our, let's say our Hilson Pocono home project, and perhaps America's Mattress, let's say the final bill comes in for that purchase, click on our vendor invoice button, and again, most of the information is filled out for us. We can use the purchase order number for the invoice number. Today's date is just fine. Again, transaction description. Final bill for mattress. Select our Visa account with our Pay With menu. And again, our Pay Now options go away. And upon clicking OK, we're going to record a $750 charge on our Visa account. Again, there it is, our invoice number, transaction description, date, and the fact that we have indeed charged that to our Bank of America Visa. Lastly, operating expenses. Let's say we have some computer supply operating expense come in, or a bill from our computer firm. Go to our expense bill, invoice number, this could be a new hard drive. We'll use today's date again. Transaction description, same as our invoice number. with our Add button to enter our account distribution, hey, notice our account number is automatically populated. That is because I have taken the time on my vendor glossary for ABC Computer Supply to use the default expense account. This is one of the tools in Design Manager that really helps you keep all of your expenses going to the proper account, and it's also allowing you not to have to quickly research which account you want to utilize for various vendors. Once it's into the vendor payee window, you don't have to worry about remembering it in the past. Design Manager will do that for you. Let's say our new hard drive cost $100. Pay with our Bank of America Visa, and we've now recorded that expense as well. In the professional platform, let's hop over there for a moment. One common question we have in our technical support department is, well, I don't want to make a single entry or individual entries for all of my meals or office expenses or general expenses that occur each month or repeatedly over time. We often suggest to create vendors to represent those classifications. So if we look at our vendor glossary, I've already created a single vendor for our meals and entertainment. And I've even, again, associated the proper expense account for meals and entertainment with that vendor. Same for office supplies. I create a single office supply generic vendor with the appropriate expense account. So rather than making individual purchases to Office Max or Staples, etc., I don't care who I order the particular merchandise from. I just know that it's office supplies and I want to quickly record those purchases. So if I had an operating expense for some office supplies, I would go to my bills and invoices, add expense, pay with American Express in this case, and rather than, again, Staples or Office Max, etc., just use my generic office supplies account. Do office supplies. Today's date. I have my expense account already configured for me, and just put in the amount. Click OK. And in Professional, of course, we have to post that transaction. And we can see our purchase right there. So you don't need to make individual transactions for everything listed on your statement or for all of the receipts you've recorded for meals or office expenses or travel expenses, those types of things. You can summate them and just add the total as a single entry to make your reconciliation process and all of your bookkeeping much faster. Tracking credit card purchases. As we enter our credit card purchases, we can monitor them using the checking window, credit card activity tab, and we can see here's all of our brand new Bank of America Visa transactions. And in Professional, that's also on our checking window, credit card tab, exact same tab with a different, slightly different name for each in the different platforms. And here we can see our brand new office supplies transaction that we recorded for our American Express. And on this window, we have some handy features. We could print out a copy of all of the transactions being shown on this particular tab. So here's our credit card register report for Bank of America for the current month, which is August in this case, and we can print that out for our records. Another handy feature is the Go To button. So say I need to track down this our Visa purchase for America's Mattress. I can highlight it right on the credit card activity tab, use the Go To button, and Design Manager is going to hop right to it. Makes my searching for that transaction far easier. Great, so we just learned how to record payments with the credit card. Well, how do we go about actually paying the credit card provider? And paying the credit card provider is one of the areas where errors are most likely to occur, but really it's quite simply an easy procedure. The best way to record payment to the credit card provider is by creating an operating expense. So if we go to our documents and accounting, go to our vendors, go down to our Bank of America, and click expense bill. First and most important, there's very frequently a tendency to try to pay Bank of America with Bank of America. That is almost never the case. Generally, we're going to be paying with a check or some other method of payment out of one of our banking institution accounts, our checking account, savings account, etc. So almost always we want to leave the pay with set for a check. The invoice number, that could be the statement date, let's say July 2015. We'll use today's date as a date of the invoice, transaction description, same. Now, by clicking our Add button, we can see our Bank of America Visa account is automatically appearing for us. Again, since we established this at Bank of America as the credit card provider for that account, those two entities are linked. This is going to indicate that we're going to be paying off or reducing the amount that we owe Bank of America. One point here, always input the amount that you're going to pay at this point. Do not input the full amount of the statement if you're paying less than that amount, and then change the amount to pay right here on the checking window. A common pitfall. This is not accurate accounting, as the actual payment to the credit card company has not yet transpired. By inputting an amount, inputting the full amount, and then changing the amount to pay, behind the scenes, you're sort of redistributing the liability from the credit card to accounts payable without getting too much into the accounting behind the scenes. This is not accurate. The accounting professional is going to come along and say, they're going to look at your balance sheet perhaps and see that that's not showing any balance for your credit card company, but your statement still does. So when entering in payments to the credit card processor, always input the amount you're going to pay at that moment, regardless if it's less than the true statement balance. So let's imagine that we're going to pay $1,000 on our, let's say $150 on our Bank of America Visa. Click OK. And if we hit OK, we can now see on our credit card activity for Bank of America. Oops. So now on our checking window, we have our check ready to write for Bank of America. And I can go ahead and print a check. Or let's imagine in this case that I went to my bank's online bill pay and remitted payment in that method. So I would tag or select Bank of America, hit the Pay Online, select the appropriate checking account, generate my payment list for my records, and process. So now our Bank of America payment drops off our Pay Bills area. We can say that we paid it in our checking account, and we can also see it as a payment under our credit card activity. So we can see all of the various transactions are interrelated and fully integrated in Design Manager. Now, we may also have instances where we're going to be receiving fees, annual fees perhaps, for the credit card, particularly American Express or some of the other high-level credit cards. Or you might have interest if you're running a balance. So let's enter another payment, and let's say that we're going to use our American Express. So now we'll go down to American Express, make our expense. This could be for July statement in the case Amex. Today's date, just fine. I'm going to pay, oh, I don't know, let's say $2,000 of our American Express. But they've also put on a $75 fee for the American Express. Well, I can enter that as well. We can make our payment to American Express, and we can also add a second bill. In this case, I want to indicate that my American Express increased by that $50. So this is the one time that we'd actually be changing our pay with from American Express, from a check to American Express. Annual fee. Again, today's date is just fine. Annual fee. Now, we're not going to be affecting the American Express account because we're already increasing it with the pay with. This account would be some other expense account, and I've already created one for bank credit card service fees. So I can look at all of these charges on my income statement. And let's say they charge us $50 for our annual fee. Click OK. Let's see what that particular transaction does. We look on our checking window, credit card activity. We can see Design Manager automatically knows that this is a special kind of transaction for American Express, charging it as a finance charge, and it's actually increasing the balance on our American Express by $50. Go ahead and process our payment to American Express. Again, we paid online. We can see that activity as well. So here's our $50 fee, increasing our total balance, and here's our payment of $2,000, bringing it down. Let's say that, another example, very common, of course, interest on our credit card. Let's say in this case that we had, well, not only the annual fee, but some interest on our balance. So in this case, let's edit our operating expense, and we're going to put in another entry for our interest. I've created a separate expense account because I want all of this information listed separately on my income statement for interest and finance charges. Let's say that it's, I don't know, $45.15. Click OK. Now we've increased that total charge. And if we look at our checking window, credit card activity, we see all of it lumped together, which is just fine as it's all increasing the balance due on the credit card. But if we look at our account glossary, we can see for our bank service charges, here's our $50 being recorded there, and for our interest, we've recorded our $45.15 there separately. So Design Manager can handle all of those different types of fees and interest, etc., that are going to be levied by the credit card provider, and we can input them very simply as well. Another way to handle finance charges is using the finance charge button during the reconciliation process, which again is discussed in greater detail in the credit card reconciliation webinar. But for our discussion today, let's go ahead and select our Bank of America Visa, put an ending date in here just as an example, and notice that this finance charge button is highlighted or enabled. So if we select that, we have a little service charge window that we can easily enter in those annual fees or finance charges. And just like we did in our operating expense window, just click our Add button, and we can select our interest or finance charges and input the amount here. Click OK, and Design Manager's not only showing it on our reconciliation and as a finance charge in the totals, but we can also see it on our credit card activities as well. So there's another mechanism to enter in your finance charges, which is particularly handy as you're going to be using the Reconcile Credit Card tab to reconcile your credit cards, and all that information will be right in your hand while doing so. Speaking of reconciling a credit card, let's touch base on the process in brief, as it does allow us to observe some potential areas for error. It's important to remember that reconciling your credit card accounts is critical to maintain proper accounting records. If you do so each month, all of the information on the transactions is fresh in your mind so it can be reviewed with the greatest ease. The process in general: go to our checking window, reconcile credit card, select the account, and then input the statement ending date. This is always provided on the credit card statement itself. Let's say for American Express we're doing the end of June. Click the Start button, and then we're going to see all of the transactions that we paid or reflected upon our American Express account up to and including June 30th that have not been included on a prior reconciliation. As we go down our statement, we simply clear the ones that are on the statement. We can use the convenient clear function to quickly clear them all, or clear everything up to and including a particular date range. Or if we have lots of entries on our reconciliation, the amount option allows us to put in amount, and Design Manager will track that one down and clear us for us. So we can see our office supplies for $45. We'll clear all of ours, and upon doing so, we see all the payments being cleared. So we have our $50 payment. We have all the charges that we've incurred during that period, and then we simply click the Reconcile button, input the credit card statement balance, which again is right on the credit card, and if everything is entered correctly, the difference goes to 0. We can print out a copy for our records, click OK, and accept. And now we can see our reconciliation in our history for American Express. So we can reprint that for our accounting professional or change it if necessary. And we can see in our credit card activity, all of those charges are now marked as cleared. Again, we'll go through this process in great detail in the credit card reconciliation webinar. So how about some pitfalls in transaction entry? Most commonly, it's going to be by entering the date incorrectly, the amount incorrectly, etc. But there are two areas that seem to have tripped people up the most. Let's see both of those first. Let's go back to our professional for a moment. We used our office supplies generic vendor as an example previously. Now, say we were recording another set of office supplies for the current credit card statement. Office supplies. Today's date, office supplies. And I know that I'm paying those on American Express. But imagine I didn't have my office supplies default account here, and this was blank, and I had to decide upon it myself. Well, a very common pitfall is for people to think, well, I'm paying my American Express. I paid these office supplies with my American Express, and there's a tendency to put the credit card that's being used as the account number. Input our amount. Okay, there's a very common thought process there. And if they click OK and post, well, things look okay. We go to our credit card tab, we can see here's our office supplies being listed. Fantastic. But there is an error in there. We've listed it as being paid by the credit card, but we're also using the credit card account as our distribution. And these can easily be seen when we're going month to month. There's going to be a difference in the ending balance of one month and the opening balance of the next. That always indicates that the account in the distribution is incorrect. So we can use our go-to, edit that office supplies, and change our account distribution. And here's a very good rule of thumb. When using your operating expense in the vendor invoice distribution, if you're unsure of what account to input there, ask yourself, what did I purchase? Not how am I paying it, what was it for? Well, it wasn't for American Express, but it was for office supplies. And now we're paying our office supplies with American Express. And now we're balancing out our transactions correctly. Another common pitfall in credit cards is using the wrong vendor for our payment to our credit card provider. For example, let's say that we're going to pay American Express. Go through our normal procedure for our operating expense, pay with check, go down to American, there's our Amex, perfect. Let's say this is our July payment. Put in our American Express account. And we make our payment of $1,500. Post that guy off. And we'll go ahead and pay it, and everything is fantastic. Again, we'll pay online for this example. Great. We can see our payment to American Express, Amex, in our checking account. And when we go to our credit card tab, we do not see the account there. Why not? Well, if you noticed, on our vendor glossary, I have my American Express AMEX vendor, and I have AX for Amex. The one associated with our American Express account is the AMEX American Express vendor. So that will not appear since I put the wrong vendor in. It's not associated with our American Express account. It will not appear here. Very common pitfall. So in that case, we would need to go back to our vendor invoices, go back to our checkbook, void our payment, and now we can edit our expense, change our vendor, reprocess our online payment, again, we can see it in our checkbook, and now we also see the payment on our credit card activity tab. So it's a few lessons there. Very imperative for those vendors to put in the default expense accounts, particularly with the credit card account at the credit card processor, to ensure the payments associated with the credit card account itself. And that brings us to the end of our discussion today, where we saw Design Manager allows us to easily configure and record payments using credit cards. So we discussed creating a credit card account, a vendor for the credit card provider, how to record purchases that were paid with a credit card. We talked about some common pitfalls, entering the purchases. We even briefly talked about reconciling the credit cards, again, which is also in its own webinar on our Help Center. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us in today's discussion, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.